learn more about a CGM? Do you wonder why someone without diabetes would like the information they gain from one? Well, earlier this week, I got to sit down with Catherine Staffaretti from Nutrisense. So listen in as we talk all things CGM. Does your metabolism suck? Are you sick and tired of being sick and tired? Do you want off the diet roller coaster? Do you wish there was a simple solution to get you healthier, smaller, and have more energy? Hey friends, I'm Jolene, a nutritional therapy practitioner, wife, furry guardian, and non-bendy yogi. Like you, I spent years chasing skinny instead of healthy, until I finally learned there's more to getting healthy than eat less and move more. Welcome to Holistic Health Made Simple, where I share all the tips, tricks, and science to set you free from the diet overwhelm and frustration with the ever-changing health rules. We go beyond the calorie and diet dogma to equip you with simple changes to real food, mindset, and lifestyle. If you are ready to learn to tailor your journey to your current health, implement simple solutions, and achieve undeniable results, then this is the podcast for you. Pop in those headphones, take a deep breath, and let's get healthy. Welcome, Catherine. This is Catherine Staffaretti.
Yes.
She is the nutrition manager over at Nutrisense, and she is an RD. And I find it interesting. There's a little tidbit about you I'd like to ask, is the pivot from finance into nutrition. What triggered that?
It's probably a question I get asked all the time. It was something. I was a math and econ major in college. I thought that's what I wanted to do. I really enjoyed working in finance. It was exciting and met a bunch of really incredible people. But at the end of the day, I realized this is back when there were actual newspapers, I would open up the newspaper, or, when I was reading a magazine or talking to people, I was so much more interested in science and in nutrition and in health and cooking and food. And all of a sudden I was like, man, I wish I could do something with that. And all of a sudden I was like, wait a minute, I can make a career out of this. It's not like it was that long ago, but it was long enough ago that this wasn't really at the forefront of people's minds in terms of, nutritionists and dietitians were still kind of just in hospital settings or clinical settings. So to be able to find a job working in really preventative care has been really wonderful. So anyways, I left finance, went back and got my master's in nutrition at Columbia. And then I've worn a bunch of different hats since then. But most recently I'm working at Nutrisense, and it's been incredible. It's been wonderful.
That is amazing. No, I myself pivoted from fashion into health and wellness. And I'm always interested to see what what made that change. So tell me a little bit about Nutrisense first, so that everybody can get a little handle of it, because you're direct to consumer primarily,
Correct.
Right?
Yep. So, not sure if your audience is familiar with what a CGM is, what a continuous glucose monitor is, but it's a little device. It's about the size of a quarter, maybe. I'm actually wearing one right now on the back of my arm. And it's got a little filament in the middle of it, a little sensor, and you insert that in the back of your arm, and it continuously monitors your glucose. We use the CGMs made by Abbott Labs. We do not make our own devices, our own sensors. But what we have created, Nutrisense has created an incredible app. And so what you do is you insert the sensor, and then you download our Nutrisense app. You can start scanning the sensor, and that will deliver the data that it's collecting right to the app on your phone. And the other distinguishing characteristic of Nutrisense is that you get one-on-one dietitian nutritionist support complimentary for the first month. So what we offer is an accountability and education and stuff like that, so that you're not just out there kind of collecting data and not knowing what to do with it. We really help you put it into practice and make sense of it.
That is the key point I want to point out, is that you try to make people make sense of it. And I think so many people just why are they wearing it? They don't even know what to do with the information. But when you have somebody behind you explaining what it all means, helps you make sense of it. And so why would a non-diabetic lean toward, I know why a non-diabetic would lean towards the CGM, but what was the whole concept of trying to get more people aware of what their glucose was doing throughout the day?
It's such a great question. And we get asked that a lot. Even my own family members are like, wait, why should I care about this? I go to the doctor and they say I'm totally fine. So, I mean, there's a couple different ways to answer it, but I would say we are, again, like I mentioned before, this is really about preventative health care. A lot of people have heard about metabolic health, and metabolic health is really made up of 5 different criteria. And one of those is a healthy and I would say stable blood sugar levels, right? That is really one of the key pillars to metabolic health, which we know is a key pillar to longevity and reducing your risk of chronic disease. The other pillars of that are like waist circumference and your lipid panel markers and stuff like that. So in our mind, if you can, and I really truly believe it's one of the most important markers of that. But if you can really get a clear understanding of what's going on with your glucose levels, that can be an incredibly helpful marker to prevent chronic disease in the long term. So that's
Okay.
really helpful. I also think that having this data on a daily basis can help you. I always tell people, like, it can help you feel better tomorrow. Seeing what's happening in your body in real time, that's what I compare it to. It's like a little window. Having this data and scanning it and seeing what's going on in your body in real time is like so cool. Like, who wouldn't want to see how their body's doing, with their breakfast or their workout or whatever, right?
Oh, absolutely. And for those that have been listening a while, I will link the metabolic health episode so you can learn more about that as well, because I go into those 5 things to pay attention. The 5 things that you actually don't need a doctor to pay attention to. You can pull your results and do it yourself. So a little bit about what I wanted to talk to you today was the importance of eating towards the meter, or how to eat towards the meter, to figure out how to really blunt the spikes, because we know the new science that's coming out, or maybe it's been there, but it's just now starting to hit the surface, is having all these huge spikes in and out throughout the day can be problematic, even if your fasting blood sugars are normal right now. So what's the importance of eating towards the meter, and how exactly do you do that?
Yeah. And I think, that's an interesting phrase, like eating for the meter. I think, that's, I don't want that to feel limiting for people, right? But I think it's really eye-opening. And I think a lot of times people come to us and they have been really restrictive of their diet, and they have, eliminated whole food groups, or they have eliminated certain foods that they've deemed bad or, not good for them. And so we are really able to help you, liberalize your diet in a way. So in that sense, if you are seeing these, we can sort of use it both ways, right? So if you are putting something like this on and all of a sudden you're seeing, oh my gosh, I had no idea that my lunch every day was causing such a huge spike. And then I had this crash afterwards, and no wonder I feel like garbage at like 2:30, and I'm reaching for a snack or I'm reaching for a cup of coffee. And, so what we can do is we can then work backwards, right? We can look and see what you're having, and we can change the composition of your meal. We can change the order in which you're eating your meal, changing up your macros, right? Eating maybe your protein or some vegetables and fat first, and then having your carbohydrates second. We can also look at some things, a little hack, like an ACV hack, or we can also do something like, well, you know what, if you really love whatever you have for lunch, you're gonna have to get up and take a walk afterwards. Like, there's other ways to help minimize those spikes, and those are all really healthy things, right? We don't need to take anything away from you, but we just maybe need to tweak some things, or change the order in which we're doing things, or add in something really beneficial like a walk afterwards. So when you're seeing that data, when you're seeing those high spikes, there's lots of different ways that we can make small adjustments, small tweaks to minimize the height of that spike, to get you back down to baseline without crashing, and to help you feeling better until dinner time, or whenever it is that you're going to be eating next. And I think that's what's really powerful about this data. Like I said, you can make a change tomorrow, right? I think a lot of times when we're tracking food or we're tracking our steps, like, there's no real impact. You're like, okay, so I hit 12,000 steps. What happens now? There's no immediate impact. What we can do is, when you see that spike, you can make a change tomorrow and you can feel better tomorrow, which is pretty cool.
Oh yeah, no, and I actually lean towards, you should know what's happening to the food, or what your body's doing to it. And I love all over Instagram, you've got all these influencers testing different foods. And my question always arises that sometimes they're eating like tortilla chips, but the average person might eat tortilla chips with guacamole. But we never see the difference between the two to know how that affects, because we do know, like, when we start pairing certain things with the fat, it slows down that spike. Not that it makes it healthier, it just slows it all down for us. So if you wanted to indulge in some tortilla chips at the Mexican restaurant, knowing to add that. So how much do you get into that when you work with people on, from the back end for that first month?
All the time, and we're here to work with our members, right? So you tell us what your health goal is, and maybe you have some non-negotiables. Maybe you say, every week I have girls' night and we go out for a margarita and chips, and like, that's a non-negotiable. I need my time with my girlfriends, or whatever it is. Then we help you do that. We say, okay, we're going to find a way. Maybe you should have a salad and a soup first, and then you can have the chips after that. Maybe let's try out some ACV beforehand. Maybe you and your girlfriends need to go for a walk after you guys go out, and so we're here to help people really dig into who what their lifestyle is. And we talk a lot about N=1. So it's like, this data is your data. It's not my data. And I don't want your data to look like my data, right? I live a different life than you. I have a different body composition. I have a different stress level. So all of this is not helpful. I'm not here to dictate to you, how to live your life. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to meet people where they are, and we just help them make adjustments to help them, better their glucose scores, and in general, just better how they feel. And so it's really eye-opening, because I think, people watch people on Instagram, or they watch an influencer, they read an article, they're like, I have to have this smoothie. This is the best smoothie ever. Well, that smoothie might be terrible for you, but it might be wonderful for that influencer, or whoever you're following. So this is really wonderful, personalized, individualized, tailored information specifically, to what's going on in your body.
Oh yeah, that is probably the number one benefit, is to tailor it to you. And I think too many people will look at the influencer and go, oh, they don't have a problem, so I won't have a problem. And most of people I work with are 45 and up, and they're hitting that perimenopause, that menopause, and their bodies are changing, and they don't understand that what even worked for them at 20 doesn't work now. And knowing what's going on in their body. And I think glucose is probably going to be the key going forward. Do you think the medical industry is going to tag along for non-diabetics?
I sure hope so. It really is incredible when you look at the cascade of hormones that all obviously are intertwined and relate to each other. And what we're using the CGM as a proxy for insulin, but we can also see how different parts of your cycle, how you are responding to carbohydrates based on how much estrogen you have. It's like a really beautiful symphony in your body. And unfortunately with women, sometimes the symphony gets a little out of tune, right? And so, so the more information you can have to kind of help retune it, to help see where you are at certain parts of your cycle, where you are when you're stressed out, right? To notice those behaviors that you might have adopted that, you used to kind of get away with when you were in your 20s and 30s, like, it's not really working. And I also definitely, for women of this age group, we focus a lot on maintaining and building lean muscle mass, because that is this muscle, and the liver are the primary storage places for glucose. And so when you take in carbohydrates, which we are not anti-carbohydrate. We love carbohydrates, right? We like them. So
I'm more of a low carbish, but nothing's bad except for Oreos. You will always hear me say, except for Oreos.
Yeah, those aren't great. Those really aren't great. I'm not going to lie.
Food.
They also get stuck in your teeth.
Yes.
But nothing is off limits, but it's more about learning how to have those types of foods in the best way in your body. And what I was saying was, when you don't have enough storage space for the incoming carbohydrates or your incoming energy in general, where's the body going to store it? it will put it in some adipose tissue, right? Which is what we're trying to avoid. And so I think a lot of times women were doing a lot of cardio earlier, in their
Mhm.
lives. They were like, woohoo, 20 minutes on the elliptical and I'm great, good to go. And then they start to go longer and longer and longer with the cardio and they're not seeing any results. But if you can start to add in some strength training, some lean muscle mass maintenance and building, you will feel first of all, you'll feel great. Second of all, body composition, who doesn't want a little more tone in certain areas, but also you will have better glucose control because you have better storage space and you won't be depositing it in other places where you don't necessarily want it.
Absolutely. I mean, I cannot stress enough lean muscle mass. And it was something that being a child of the 80s and 90s, like, oh no, you only eat a little bit, you don't eat any fat. It's like it kind of screwed a lot of us up. So we're almost going backwards and trying to fix things that for 20, 30 years we thought were right. And it was actually doing more damage than good.
Right.
So the lean muscle mass, what do you see when you talk to people or work with them? If they prioritize this protein, does it help with the glucose curves and the spikes?
Prioritizing protein, is that the
Mhm.
question?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yep. So, and I think a lot of women too don't necessarily feel comfortable eating more protein. Sometimes they get worried or they're like, oh, I'm really sick of chicken. And I'm like, well, there's lots of other forms of protein out there. And absolutely, when you see, when you really make sure that you're having protein at each meal, also protein it has a satiety factor to it. And a lot of proteins are paired with fats, and both of those with the addition of some fiber, will help your body feel fuller longer and will give you that sustained energy. When we see people prioritizing protein, their spikes aren't as high. They come back to baseline gently, and then they have that maintained steady state glucose until the next time that they eat. When we see that people are a little bit out of whack and they're rushing and they're grabbing this and that and they're not making it a priority, we're seeing high swings, big crashes, and then it sort of sets them off on this roller coaster. Literally, you can see a roller coaster in their data. By the time they go to bed, they're exhausted, and then they're not sleeping well. So it kind of sets you up for a cycle of not feeling great on a daily basis.
Awesome. And then there's a lot of talk now about starting the day with a heavy protein meal. Like your first meal should be heavy protein, ditch, your cereals and all of that. Do you see a difference in the data of people when they switch over to maybe eggs and something else that has that 30 grams of protein in the morning, maybe just fibery vegetables or maybe some nuts with it versus the cereal or the toast?
Absolutely. Some of the highest spikes I've ever seen have been with like a breakfast cereal. It's like, whoa, what's happening? Because you are in a fasted state, even if it's just a simple, 12-hour fast from dinner to breakfast. When you hit your body first thing on an empty stomach with carbohydrate, it will dissolve quickly. It will be dispersed quickly into your blood sugar and everything will get rolling. There's also depending on what time you're eating, there's just a natural increase of hormones in the morning and cortisol. Those are really in the early morning hours, like that 4 a.m. to 8 a.m. time frame. And maybe you're also spiking a little bit because of your intake of caffeine, if you're particularly sensitive to caffeine. So carbohydrate, caffeine, and hormones all kind of come together to give you this big spike in the morning. If you can take some time to sort of, settle into your morning in a calm way, so to keep the cortisol down, right? Maybe delay your coffee, maybe for an hour or two after you wake up. And if you can eat some protein, you will have a much gentler rise and fall to your morning meal. So I absolutely recommend, have some almonds first, have a hard-boiled egg first, have some leftover greens from the night before mixed into some scrambled eggs. You will see either a flat line or just a little bit of an increase in that early morning. It will set you up for such a great day.
Yeah, I found that sets up the rest of the day without having those crashes later on or reaching for multiple cups of coffee. I'm big on delaying coffee at the morning, especially those who wake up with an alarm, because you don't know where in your set. Like if you wake up naturally, I'm fortunate enough, I wake up naturally early. So I know that 90 minutes, I'm pretty much good to go. I also am not caffeine sensitive. I'm blessed with being the fast metabolizer of caffeine. So, but to do things like that. So what other suggestions do you have before we wrap up, and then you'll tell us all how to get one. But what other suggestions you have for like a middle-aged woman that's struggling? Because I know that I've seen on your website like that you do help those in menopause or perimenopause get through that, because our bodies and our insulin sensitivity is changing, and it's changing differently. Like we don't have those set 28-day cycles. Like it could be 60 days 1 month and 16 days, or it could just be gone and you don't know what to do. So you don't know when you're insulin sensitive versus resistant throughout that month.
Totally. So we always say knowledge is power, right? So the more you can learn about what your body is doing, the better equipped you are to make positive changes. So I would say, for women, obviously wearing a CGM is that knowledge and power, right? But if you can just start to take notice of how your body is feeling, I think women in this age range, 45, 55, 60, I mean, you are so pulled in so many different directions. You might have a full-time job. You're caring for children. You're caring for aging parents. You're pulled in like 9 different directions, right? And probably like pumpkins have to get carved and dogs need to go to the vet, and there's like 1,000 things that you're doing, right? So really taking stock of what's happening in your body is like the last priority. But hopefully that they are listening to this podcast and they're thinking about it. It's something that they can start to put at the forefront. So I always say, take a moment every day to just check in with yourself. I'm not talking, it doesn't even have to be meditation, but it's just checking in with yourself. How are you doing? How hungry are you? How stressed are you? Have you had enough water? Can you add in more steps to your day? Or not even steps, but just can you get up and move around in your day? And people always ask me like, what's the one thing you always tell people to do to help manage their glucose better? And I say it's totally free. And it's a really lame saying that my husband always rolls his eyes at whenever I say it, but it's after you eat, move your feet. So no matter what you're doing, I don't care where you are, I don't care how old you are or what's the situation, just get up and move around after you eat. Not only will your digestion feel better, generally your mental health will feel better. You're not just sitting and scrolling on your phone or watching Netflix or something. You're up, you're moving, get out there. Your glucose will come back to a baseline in a steady state and you will feel better. So I say women of any shape, size, whatever's going on in your life, you can do that.
Okay, so I have one last question. Ranges. Now I know there's not a set number range, but what are you looking at? Like 50 points, 60 point, like when is it too high from base to high? Because I know everybody's going to be in a different starting point. So like I get asked all the time, well, what should my numbers be between? And I'm like, well, that depends on where you started. Like I don't know. But like what ranges do you guys try to keep things in at Nutrisense, like when you're working with people?
Yep. So our app, the default range is 70 to 140. That's really where we want people to live. But again, like you said, some people just run lower. And so maybe their bottom threshold is more like 60 and they kind of don't ever go above 120. And, that's fine. That's their range. Or maybe someone's struggling with insulin resistance or some other, pre-diabetes or something like that. Their range might go up to 180. And then, we can adjust that up there and meet them where they're at and hopefully work them down over time. So that's our time within range. But we also give a score for each meal. We give a meal score based from 0 to 100. And that's really what we're looking at, the delta of your glucose.
Okay.
That's the change in your glucose based on what you're eating, which is really helpful for people because, you might stay within our 70 to 140, but you might be swinging all the way up and down all day long, right? And so we want that delta, that change from where your glucose is when you start to eat versus the peak to be less than 30. So we don't really want your glucose to swing up more than 30 points on any given meal. So we have even more metrics and things like that, but those are really the basics, right? I like to say we're looking for gentle ocean waves. We're not looking for a flat line, but we're not looking, the big tsunamis are not what we're looking for either.
Yeah, and that's the key is I think a lot of people I watch, they're trying to look for this flat line, and you need insulin and you need to spike it some
or it will forget what to do. I mean, there's something called physiological insulin resistance where you don't spike it enough, and it's kind of like, now what do I do now that you have some carbs, like if you've been on a zero carb diet or something like that. So that was my thing is I think that we go from extremes to extremes and we don't know what's going on inside of us.
Right. And I think it's really important not to feel restricted, because we all know that never ends up being your long-term success path, right? So if you are allowing yourself no carbs ever, like very rarely have I come across someone who's been following that for 20 years, right? And so you're using this data to learn how to have both, right? And maybe you flex. There's something called metabolic flexibility. So you might flex into more of a ketosis, and then you might flex into using carbohydrates. And exactly right. You want the body to be primed to use either one at any time, to be able to switch fuels, if you will, right? Like a car, right? You can shift into this one and you can shift into that one.
That was going to be my next question, is how much do you work on that metabolic flexibility? Because we've, as human beings over the past 50, 60, 100 years, I don't know how long, but we've lost that ability to easily use whatever is just there. And so that's good to know that, we want to flex. We don't want to be one or the other. And I think the end game truly should be metabolic flexibility. It's my personal opinion, but you got too many people on both sides fighting, like, no, this way's right, that way's right. I'm like, what about right in the middle, people?
Right. And I think truly for women that are going through menopause transition is that, sometimes you don't have a lot of estrogen in there. And so it is much harder for your body to process carbohydrates during those very, very low estrogen time frames. So, maybe that is a time when you're going to be lower carbohydrate, and maybe you are going to rely a little bit more on ketones for fuel. Like, that's okay, but you don't have to live there, your whole, like the whole time. And so learning how you can kind of like, upgrade a little bit with some, higher quality carbohydrates, and then maybe, downgrade that a little bit and really amp up your protein at certain points. So I think, again, it's that knowledge is power, and that N equals 1, because, where you are in your cycle is different than mine, is different than, Susie's over there. So it's really important for women to be educated and to know what's going on in their own bodies.
Absolutely. And I just want to point out one more time that just because you have normal fasting blood sugar doesn't mean what's going on throughout the day is normal.
Agreed.
That's just I just want to reinforce that, is that the reason why a CGM can be really beneficial is because we don't know what's happening throughout the day as we're eating. If you're testing in the morning, or your doctor tests and you're always 85, so you're always great. If you've got that midsection, you've got problems. You have problems happening throughout the day that just haven't really presented as a health issue yet.
Correct. If you're not sleeping well, if you're struggling with sleep, all that kind of stuff, you're struggling with low energy, or maybe you just even have a different kind of diagnosis, like perhaps it's been a thyroid diagnosis or some GI issues happening right now. Like, all of that intertwines, right? All of that plays a role together in your body. And so exactly, when you go and get your lab work done once a year, that's like, okay, great. Tuesday morning in January, you looked fantastic. Like, that is not the full picture. That doesn't tell us how you're doing overall.
No, I always joke because before I started my health journey, I was morbidly obese with perfect glucose numbers, perfect lipid panels, perfect blood pressure. But under the hood, there was something going on. Luckily, I caught it. And then that's when I became an advocate, went back to school like you did, and started my journey. So that's why I always find it when people pivot, that's kind of cool.
Yeah, it's awesome. And we're generally really, really, really passionate about what we do, right? Because we stepped off our other track and really made this our priority. So good for you. That's what an accomplishment.
Thank you. So how does one get a CGM?
Yeah. So I would also like to say to your audience, again, if they're not totally sure of how this can apply to them, and this could be a helpful tool for them, we have an incredible blog on our website. We call it The Journal, and it's written by, it's all science-based, bite-sized articles that are written by our nutritionists or reviewed by our nutritionists. And it really shows you the depth and breadth of how this data can apply to all manners of health goals. So I would really recommend everyone to go check that out. We also have a free ebook on PCOS and weight loss plateaus that you can download, which I think is incredibly helpful, again, also to see how glucose data can help in those scenarios as well. Our website is www.nutrisense.io, and we're also all over social media, and you can watch videos of people putting a CGM on or doing different food tests and showing what their glucose looks like, just to show you all the different things you can do with it.
Awesome. Well, Catherine, thank you so much for joining me today. I think you are a wealth of knowledge and just reinforce everything I preach on a day-to-day basis. So I appreciate that. And thank you so much for your time. Anything else you want to throw out there, or?
Oh gosh. I mean, there's so many things to throw out there. No. I think it was wonderful to talk to you. I love to find kindred spirits out there that are, we all believe in the greater good and helping everyone live their best lives and, prevent chronic disease down the road. So thank you for doing your podcast and reaching so many people.
Thank you so much, Catherine. And I will maybe talk to you again. I don't know. We'll see.
Awesome. Thanks.
Have a great day.
You too.
Thanks.
Thanks for listening in today. I hope you got some nuggets to take on your health journey. Remember, this podcast is for educational and entertainment purposes. No medical advice is being given. By listening to this podcast, you agree to the full disclaimer, which is linked in the show notes. If you found this podcast helpful, could you take 30 seconds and leave a review? Your feedback means the world to me, and it helps others discover my show. Once again, thank you for being part of my community. Until next time, have a blessed day.